Now, Tomas is Director of Corporate Communications at Microsoft, Middle East and North Africa, and some of you may have heard his best presentation yesterday was entitled Lessons Learned from the Arab Spring. Well, this is a chance for us to share his experience with an entire audience. We don't have a video for him because this was relatively short notice, so please give a warm round of applause to Tomas Jensen. Hi, Tomas. Here, microphone here. Let's see if we can just get some questions so that we can kind of broaden the reception of your messages from yesterday, or some of them at least. Where were you exactly when the events of the Arab Spring erupted, seeing as you're looking after Middle East and North Africa for Microsoft?
I was, and first of all, good morning. I hope you all recovered from last night.
Yeah.
As have we. Between the beginning of what we now call Arab Spring, beginning of January 2011 and mid-February, you might remember that Hosni Mubarak left office on February 11th.
Yeah.
I was both at home in Istanbul and traveling in Qatar and the Emirates. And the main thing that you always made sure during those 5 or 6 weeks was that there was at least one TV set running, if not two, one with CNN and the other one with Al Jazeera, to make sure we really stayed on top of developments. And the second thing was that you tried to be in constant contact with your team. So talk to the folks on the ground in Egypt, in Tunisia, to make sure they were safe and they were in good spots.
Okay, so what were the immediate implications for Microsoft as a company with people on the ground in the Middle East and in North Africa, where things were looking scary?
I guess for us as communications managers, but also people managing communicators, there are three main dimensions that we looked at. The first one, the most relevant one, people safety. Second one, crisis communications, issue management. And then lastly, how will we actually adopt our strategy to the incidents, to new audiences, etc. So on the first dimension, we made sure that we always knew where our people were. In one case, in Libya, we evacuated the whole population out of the country as soon as possible. The second dimension, immediately protect the company's reputation and image, was where we did, it sounds a little conservative, but we just applied the typical issue management and crisis communications mechanism, of course on a different scale and in dimensions we hadn't thought of before. And then lastly, with one big audience breaking away, government elites and others emerging, as we call them, the future builders, the protesters, the activists, new media channels, or at least rapidly growing media channels like Al Jazeera, now a global player, and I think they weren't one. I wouldn't say they weren't one 18 months back, but also the growing relevance of social media.
Now, we will get to that, but was there any indication at the outset that things were going to spread like wildfire, that things were going to happen so fast?
Well, first of all, I don't think that anybody expected anything to happen. We kind of got to terms with the fact that self-serving rulers were in the Middle East and would run and exploit their countries and their population for ever and ever. So just the pure fact that something happened was unexpected. And then when things expected, again, we were all taken by surprise. How quickly things happened in individual markets, but then how they also spread from Tunisia to Egypt, to Libya, to Bahrain, to Yemen. So, super surprise. Unfortunately, I guess at first, and you can tell from the name that we still use Arab Spring, that we all in the region, but also globally, had a lot of hopes. And if you look at the developments, at least in some places, it's at this point not that promising. So we all have to do our prayers and hope that things will actually turn out for the good and then finally end up where we expected them to end up.
Now, there are those that say that social media was responsible really for the entire force of the thing, and then there are those that say, well, that is actually overrated. How big a role did social media really play from what you could tell?
So I refrain from calling it the Facebook revolution or the Twitter revolution. Social media and digital communications channels played a sparking role, to some degree a critical role. Yet if you look at the dimensions of let's say, current Twitter users, for example, it's actually not that much. As of today, there are around 200,000 active Twitter accounts in Egypt. If you look at Tahrir Square 18 months back, there were 2 million people. So at best, 10% of those people actually were on Twitter, and probably not many more on Facebook. And then, ironically, the biggest movement in Egypt happened during those couple of days where the government actually had shut down the internet. So we looked at it as kind of the Facebook revolution, but the things got really hot when people had to go back to the oldest form of communications, oral communications, going from door to door, mobilizing people.
Mouth to mouth.
On top of that, when there wasn't an internet, we could only communicate with our people on the ground through fax machines. So it was really a multimedia revolution from oral communications, yes, including Facebook and Twitter, but that wasn't the whole base of the whole movement.
Okay. Looking back at the events and at how the various revolutions have panned out, and many of them are obviously still going on, what were the most important lessons for you as a communicator and then as a company?
I guess there are two, again, on very different dimensions. One is around crisis communications, and that you always need to be on the back foot. You never know what's going to happen anywhere. What really helped us, and as you might are aware, this wasn't the first crisis that Microsoft went through. So we have some processes in place, and we have well-trained people. And the core advice is super simple. It's stay calm, don't rush, but act quickly if things boil up and turn south. And then secondly, when you think about developing a strategy, when you think about developing a messaging framework, what are really the topics that you want to be perceived as? Never follow the political agenda of the day. Make sure that you follow the national agenda. What are the big topics that you can focus on that aren't necessarily owned by one particular political entity, but that have a very strategic and long-term meaning for the country.
Any changes in your long-term communication strategies after these events?
I guess it's not that much a strategy, but more a tactical one. There were a few pictures of very senior Microsoft people shaking hands with then former regime people. And we're now a little more cautious on who's having a picture taken with whom, in case those might...
on those rather unfortunate photo ops that we heard about last evening.
French or whatever.
Alles klar. Thomas Jensen, thank you very much for standing. And at this point, I'll ask you to take a chair next to Dr. Leandro Herrero.